So some people's predictions turned out to be true. This blimmin' thing managed to drive all the way down to the Pyrenees, not with me in it. And then on the way back, it went wrong and I got the distress call of it's making a terrible noise. So I drove down with the Volvo and I had to tow it about 30 miles back here to a relative place of safety to figure out what's gone wrong. It was running when I picked her up, but I decided to tow it because it was making a bit of an horrible noise. And yet it was the timing chain tensioner has gone. And I've just opened up the top of the head and this thing here was just sort of hanging loose. There was bits of timing chain here. There's a little bit of timing chain tensioner stuck into the top of the chain here and another bit down here. So it's pulled the chain around. So I'm not too sure. It's probably not done the chain much good, although it only ran with the noise for about 10-20 minutes. But yeah, the thing is how far do I go into it now? I haven't got my impact wrench or anything like that. I'm going to have to replace the tensioner, but how much of the tensioner am I going to be able to pick out? Am I going to be able to get it all out so it's ready? I don't know. I'm going to have to just look at this one and see how it goes. Well, just after this point, things went from bad to worse when I took out the oil filter and I discovered that there was lots of metal dust inside it, all trapped within the pleats. Yes, it turned out that something had clearly got chewed up. So it was time to take the sump off and then have a look at that oil pump and just see what's happened and if other bits are stuck in that sump. Right, so I've removed the oil pump and a little bit of timing chain tensioner was up here, but it's notchety upside down. Oh, it's notchety right way up. It's notchety in every other direction. Now, you would think this would stop whatever's gone through, but I don't know. I'm kind of wondering what's wrong with this. So what I want to do is take it apart and just see what I've got in here. They decided to use these blimmin' Torques, a Torque T45. Can I find a T45 in France? All I found was these, and of course I need to torque stuff up later on. So I've got a new oil pump coming, but I would like to know what was wrong with this one. So there are no oil pressure problems whatsoever on this car. The reason why I'm taking this pump apart is just those bits and pieces of aluminium that I found in the oil filter. There was also no aluminium dust whatsoever in the sump. So my belief is the oil pump's got some kind of wear, maybe a bit of the guide broke up and went inside the pump and caused it to create a load of shavings that then got pushed up into the oil filter. But it'll be interesting to see what's actually happened inside there. But this is not quite the way you want to spend your holiday. Trying to source parts in France, having to learn the French words for the various parts. I know a fair amount of French, but Vilebrequin. I had no idea Vilebrequin was a blooming crankshaft. Not needed to find that out before. So here is the oil pump. So what happens to an oil pump? This oil pump is this is like this, and then it runs like that to basically trap oil between the gears and then push it under pressure up. So looking a little bit deeper into this oil pump, you can see that there's some real sort of serious score marks up there inside the chamber. That's the chamber that these vans sort of sit in, these impellers. So what must have happened is some bits of broken chain guide must have chewed up in the cam gears, gone through this mesh, and then got in there and basically got stuck in between those vanes and just scored out some of the aluminium there, which then of course goes up through this pump, up through this hole directly to the oil filter. So the good thing is I think the oil filter contained everything, which is great. But yeah, this pump definitely needed replacing. So there's a few parts from the carnage that was my timing guide disaster. So this is the actual culprit of the whole problem, this timing guide, and as you can see, it snapped off here. Obviously the chain stretched or something. This flapped around like crazy and then it just snapped off on this thing. Quite why they would just bend a piece of aluminium like that, inducing stress in this joint here, and think that's okay. I just don't know. I just don't understand why that is acceptable, particularly given that so many engines have had so many problems. Why they're still making it like this. I mean, just the manufacturing technique probably causes stress in that junction. Here's what's left of the plastic that would normally sit along the top there. And you can see it's just sort of flapped around. This bit's been bent up. A lot of aluminium's been worn off here, which ended up in the oil filter, along with bits from the oil pump, the oil there. And you can just see this is all chewed up. This bit's obviously got stuck in the timing chain and went over the tops of the gears, the cam, cogs and everything. And yeah, it's just shattered to pieces. A lot of wreck there. A bit of aluminium from that there, I think, that I found in the sump. But otherwise, the sump was actually clean, by the way, which was interesting. I replaced the oil pump chain simply because obviously I was replacing the oil pump, and this was a bit stretched. It was quite loose and floppy, and the new one is not tight, but you know, it's firm. So I think that was a really good idea to change that. This is your sort of main timing guides, and these were absolutely fine, apart from this bit breaking off here when the chain must have flopped around a bit. Interestingly, you see this tube goes down here. There's a round thing here. That's where the oil dipstick goes down. So every time you check the oil, it's pulling the dipstick all the way through this timing guide. I don't think that's particularly a problem, but it does mean that when you're checking the oil, it's a pain to actually figure out how full it is, because obviously as you pull it out, you're picking up any oil that was in this tube, so you're struggling to get a good reading on the oil. Just a quick side note at this point then, to mention that the way I'm checking the oil now is I take the dipstick out, I wipe it all off on some kitchen towel, maybe I stick it in again and take it out again and wipe it off again to get the oil out of that tube. Then I stick it in a final time, wait a couple of seconds, pull it out, and then roll it on some kitchen towel. And that will give you a reasonable sort of indication of just where on that dipstick the level of the oil actually is. Now, if you keep on burning a lot of oil and you find you're using a lot of oil over time, it's quite likely that your valve stem oil seals have gone. This is a job that can be repaired in the car, and it's not the easiest job, I don't think, but I'm going to have to do it on this car because I do have an oil consumption problem. The timing chain tensioner, this fell apart, and this seems to happen to everyone. It falls apart when you take it out, and you can see that, well, I guess that happens as soon as you wind it in. It must sort of go all up to, you know, twist that spring around, but it's supposed to be all in one piece. And I'm not quite sure why it falls apart, but it does anyway. These 3 bolts here, these are important to change. This is the crankshaft pulley and then the cam cog pulleys bolts, and they're stretch bolts. So you tighten them to something like 50 Newton meters, that one, 20 Newton meters, these two, and then you go 180 degrees plus, and that stretches the metal out. So you really have to change them. I went to the Peugeot dealer, got these about 20 quid I think for the 3, but the thing is, you got to remember, these are the things that actually keep pressure on your bottom cogs and on your cogs that go up on the cams up there, and if those were to loosen up, then obviously the timing would go off the engine and potentially valves would be hitting pistons and wrecked. So you really have to change these bolts. They're quite easy to get from a Peugeot dealer next day sort of thing. So yeah, that's the carnage that I found inside the engine. At this point, I'd just like to give a big shout out and thank you to the Mini2 forum and the good people on the Peugeot RCZ forum as well. You know, it was research on there that helped me just fix this car in somewhat difficult circumstances. But with the car all now dismantled, and just having to wait on all the parts because no one actually had the parts in stock, me and the boy just took Pipey to sea and had a few days of actual holiday before coming back to carry on the good work. So suitably refreshed, I get back from sea to find the parts have arrived, but I'm not quite happy with this pump. And I don't know, it's supposed to be a Phoebe pump, and I'm looking over it, and the only identification mark is F0086. Now, this might be a Phoebe pump, but I'm a little bit worried that someone's not just basically bought a pump from them, swapped it over with a genuine pump, bought a genuine pump, a cheapy pump, swapped them over, and then sent the cheapy pump back in the genuine box, because it did seem to be, it wasn't sealed and security sealed. So I'm wondering if I've been diddled. I think what I'm going to have to do is I have to go ahead and get this thing on the car, because I need the car back working again. But I'm going to send all these part numbers and pictures of this to Phoebe and say, is this actually a genuine pump? Now, I did speak to Phoebe about this. Phoebe UK said they didn't recognise the pump. Phoebe in Germany, though, said they did recognise the pump. It was one of theirs, but it's essentially made by someone else, so they haven't put their own part numbers on it, but it still comes with the Phoebe guarantee. So essentially, Phoebe's just become a reseller of parts. Now, I'm not particularly happy about this because I paid a premium price for what was supposed to be a premium product. But I don't really have time to muck around and wait for another pump to be delivered. I want to go out to sea again, and my holiday time is running out. So I'm just going to have to fit this thing. Quick point to note on the original pump is look how many numbers, serial numbers I've got. Country of origin. All these different types of serial numbers that can be linked to batch numbers, codes, everything, manufacturer's stamp. That's what I would expect to see on something that's genuine and something that a manufacturer actually believes in and has confidence in, is willing to stamp their name on. Okay, these blimmin' stupid oil pumps, it's really, really annoying. 300 quid, and then they don't supply you with the little gear that goes on here, which means you've got to somehow lock the pump, hold it, and tighten this middle bolt to 5 Newton meters, and then go to plus 90 degrees. Everything seems to be plus 90 degrees on this car, plus 180, it's annoying. Anyhow, I found a grinder's key for, putting a grinder wheel on there. Slots in there quite nicely. And then you can use that to counter hold the gear wheel while you tighten this up. So it's time to fit this timing chain. It's been an absolute nightmare, this. My mood's not really in it as well. But apparently you just assemble the timing chain and all the guides like this. You have to really degrease these pulleys because they're held in place by friction. Isn't that great? That's just what you want. Pulleys and things that stop your engine from falling apart, held in place by friction. Perhaps they never heard of Woodruff keys or something like that. I don't know, but it just really annoys me. So you just lower it down in place, is what they say. This magical they. I'm guessing it's somewhere down like, oh, I think it actually sits on somewhere. Something like that. I'm going to use the tow hook as the special Peugeot or BMW piece they went on about. And then that just sort of sits there. And then we have to go around here. So everything has to be really, really degreased. Yeah, and then if we look down here, you can see that's the bottom of the timing chain there. And all I've got to do is slot the pulley in place now. I've put this crankshaft seal in. I had to use the cans here. I dented that can of lentils up a little bit, and that can of chopped tomatoes, but they should be fine. Still good to go. Still good to eat. But then I kind of finished it off with this. What I should have done is just used a piece of wood like that. And that, when I did that, it worked. But yeah, apparently here, you just shove it in around about 1.5, 2 millimeters, recess it in. It would be nice if they had like a proper recess that you could tap it into, but no, it's just to 1.5, 2 millimeters or something. So I think I've got it in good. So now I've got to go and get the crankshaft pulley and stick that in. Joy, hey? So a little bit of a quick halfway note here on reassembly. Oh, I'm getting hopeful. It's not halfway, about third way. 25%. 20% of the way. There you go. Engine mount, you don't need to take it out fully. You just need to jack up the bottom, undo these 4 bolts, and then undo those 4 bolts. And with those bolts undone, you can get to the bolt that you need to install to hold the timing chain guide back in place. So these timing chain guides, there's 3 bolts in all holding them. The one that's up underneath the engine mount and 2 that are just above the crankshaft pulley. You have to do all those bolts up first before you put the crankshaft pulley in, because one of the bolts is a little bit too low and you'll get the crankshaft pulley in and then find that you can't actually get the bolt in, which is really frustrating because it happened to me. Luckily, I hadn't actually torqued up the crankshaft pulley at this point. Otherwise, I'd have been really swearing. So one of the other things I had to order before I went to sea was a camshaft locking kit. So here is the timing chain kit here. So this slots over the top of the engine block there, and these slots here lock the cams in place. The clearance on here is a little bit too great, so it's best to use some feeler gauges each side just to make sure that those cams can't move at all. Obviously more expensive kits you wouldn't need to do that, but this is a fairly cheapy kit, but it works well. These bolts bolt all of this assembly down to the top of the engine. You've got your crankshaft flywheel locking pin here that just slots in to lock the flywheel in place. This bit I didn't use, and the general advice on all the forums is don't bother with this. Just screw your proper timing chain tensioner all the way in, torque it up and be done with it. This adds a variability in that you don't really want. Okay, so now I have got the pulleys and everything in down there. I've got the crankshaft pulley done up to 180 degrees, so 50 Newton meters, and then another 180 degrees round. I've done these up to 20 Newton meters and an extra 100 degrees. It's got to go to 180. And this one, 20 Newton meters and 50 degrees so far, because this one I haven't done up too tight, but it keeps on coming round and not lining up. So when I take all the timing tools off, turn the engine a couple of times, stick it all back together again, this one keeps on being out. Now it might be these cheapy Amazon tools, so I've put feeler gauges in just to make sure they hold okay, counter holding the crank with this. So now I'm going to take out everything, turn it over a couple of times and see if it runs again. But the crankshaft pulley wasn't too bad to do up. I just had my massively long bar coming out here, and then I had a length of pipe which I seem to have lost over there. I just stuck on the end of the ratchet and I just did it up, and it went quite easily actually, up to 180 degrees. I mean obviously 180 degrees, the last bit's quite a bit of a push, but that's okay. Right, so I've been up and down on this thing like crazy. I've turned over the engine several times. I've now got feeler gauges stuck in here, and the last time it seemed to work. This one's now done up to 180 degrees, and this one seemed to be good from the get-go, but this one was constantly too far that way. I got a sneaking suspicion that, I mean, for one thing, there is a slight allowance if that one's out, but the second thing is this horrible, manky, cheap, crappy aluminium bracket sort of clamps down on here and probably pulls that cam round half a degree. So in some ways, if it's slightly like that, it might not matter too much. But right now it's correct, but perhaps it's slightly up. I don't know, but it's correct. The things go in with the feeler gauges each time now. So, but this, if anything, it's slightly that way is what I mean. So now I've got to get the last 90 degrees on this, because I got it up to 50 and then I did it up to 90. And so I'm going to counter wedge my socket like this, and then I'm going to go like that. I'm just going to look at the end. Oh, it's a little titchy bit more. So I mark the end of the bolt nuts with a flat line, so I would know how far I've got to go around, and I'm almost there now. Actually feels like it's just got there, maybe a titchy bit more. As I say, these are held by friction only, which is a bit silly if you ask me. Right, how's that looking? Yep, that's 180 degrees now. So that should be this done. That should be good. So I've got to take everything off again. I've got to rotate it around a couple of turns again, and then I can smack everything together and hopefully we're all good. Well, I don't know. Blimmin' thing. So once you've done the whole physical repair on the car, you do have to do the electronic repair, or rather clear codes and reset the adaptations. So to do this, you need an OBD scanner to clear the codes. Now on the Peugeot RCZ, the OBD scanner, for some bizarre reason, is in the middle console here, just behind the ashtray and that little cover there. Just plug it straight in there. So to read or clear the codes, you just plug the scanner in to the OBD port there. Switch the ignition to on, but don't start the engine. And then hopefully this will come up, of course, in French, because it's a French OBD scanner. So you click scan. Then we go codes trouve, that means codes found. Codes and registry. Part of codes, that's great. Go escape. Codes en attente, that means codes waiting. Now sometimes it's useful to check this to see if the code's coming back but hasn't actually triggered enough to actually set the check engine light. And if you look, it says pas de code en registre, so no codes registered, which is great. But basically, yeah, if I'd have had codes, then back here I could have then taken a note of the codes, looked up on Google, and then when I'm happy that I'd resolved the problems, I can go to delete the codes, and then that would clear the codes off the computer. Oh, it's getting a bit hot in here now. But anyhow, yeah, that resets the code. So that's what you've got to do to clear the codes off of the ECU. But there was one thing left to do that I had to do, and that was clear the Vanos adaptations. Now that's relatively easy to do. So what you do, you turn the ignition key on, but don't start the engine. You then go round to the passenger side, and because this is a French car, they've gone and stuck the boot release down here, and you have to open the door to be able to open the boot, which is actually quite cool. So the ignition is still on, then you have to come round here, open the bonnet like so, and then you come to the battery. There's a quick release on the positive terminal. You have to disconnect the positive terminal and immediately stick it to the negative. Now that would be rather difficult to do because the negative's over here. So what I did is I got a jumper lead and I just stuck a jumper lead somewhere on the chassis and immediately touched that straight to the jumper lead. And then give it a couple, 5 minutes or so, then turn the ignition key off and then reconnect the battery. And that actually clears the Vanos adaptations. That's, you know, your cam gears here are controlled by the computer, and they learn where the valves all are, where the cams are, where everything happens, you know, how the fueling is working in response to the oil pressure going to the variators. So you have to clear all of that because obviously you've changed a load of bits and you want it to be back in the base setting so it can start again. That procedure, by the way, is called a power latch, and thanks to a guy called Mike on Mini 2 forum for providing that information. It was really, really helpful. And it meant that as soon as I'd done that, the car was running sweet as anything again and ready to return to the UK. Well, it's coming to the end of my holiday. The car's managed to get back to the UK safe and sound. No codes or anything, no more problems, no nasty noises. So I'm quite happy about all of that. I'm about to leave today. Got to drive the Volvo all the way to the port, and of course I'm slightly worried because it's making wheel bearing noise, or perhaps a CV joint noise, I don't know, but it'll be okay, it'll get me there, I'm sure. Well, just as she's done on over 35 trips before, the trustworthy Volvo just got me back to the UK all safe and sound. And once I was back there, I thought it was time to jump in that Peugeot and see just how well it's going and how it's held up on its journey back. So how do I feel about this car now? Well, if you'd asked me that when I was in the midst of doing all that repairs and I was struggling and I was covered in oil and junk and thinking, why am I doing this on my holiday? you would have got a response from me that probably would have involved a fair few swear words. But then I took it for a test drive along some of my favourite bits of road in France. Really nice curvy stuff. And there's no escaping from the fact that this is such a fun, engaging car to drive. It just goes, it just follows your directions. It's such a fun car. So yeah, it's fair to say that within a few minutes I'd forgotten all the pain, I'd forgotten all the misery, I'd forgotten all the irritation, and it was like, you know, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't take much to win me back over, really. But the fact is that I do need to change some of my original advice. This car, or this engine rather, that's fitted to Minis, Volvos and all kinds of BMWs and stuff, I think you just have to remember that the service intervals should be 8,000 miles, maybe 10,000 miles, not 20,000 miles. Likewise, I think you need to take the view that at 75,000 miles, you are going to do a chunk of preventative maintenance. You're going to change that timing chain. If the valve stem seals are older than, you know, a few years, which of course on this car they will be because these cars are all over 10 years old now, then, you know, you're going to have to change the valve stem seals, which I don't think is a terribly difficult job to do. I've got to do it in the next month or so because she is smoking and burning oil still. But if you take the view on those things that you're going to have to do a bit of preventative maintenance every 75,000 miles, it needs a reasonable amount of attention, which incidentally every car with a cam belt will be the same, then, you know, there's no doubt this is a really cool engine. It produces a lot of horsepower, and in something like this car, you know, this car really makes all that worthwhile. I can't speak to Minis and the Volvos that have got this engine, or the Ford Focuses, but for me, this car, I can forgive that engine's shortcomings because it's just enormous fun to drive. Yeah. So anyhow, I hope this video has been useful to people out there. I hope it's been, well, it's not going to be mildly entertaining, is it? It's just a story of woe and problems and issues, but hopefully it'll be useful to people out there. And if you thought it was okay and it helped you, please consider liking and subscribing. That would be great. And if you've got any questions at all, please feel free to ask them and I'll do my best to answer them, you know, and hopefully it can help a few people out there and stop them from having similar problems in the middle of their holiday too. Yeah, great. And yeah, have a great day.